I just did it in an afternoon, the original list of rules. I was playing on Quora. I wrote about 40 answers for Quora, something like that, and I really haven't partaken in that forum for a long time now. I was investigating it, and some kid had asked, what do you need to know in order to lead a good life, or what's most important to know, something like that. And I thought, well, I'll take a crack at answering this. And I made this list of 42 rules, and it got very popular on Quora, much more popular. Typical Pareto distribution, like that one answer got more views than all of my other answers put together. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I had touched something for some reason. And out of that, when I was asked by an agent who contacted me, Sally Harding, of Cook Agency, she asked me if I was interested in writing something more popular, and I knew that those rules had found an audience.
Let's dive into the book, because actually so many of the things that we're talking about now are sort of part and parcel to all of the chapters here. So chapter 1, and what I really liked about this also is the way you organized it, the new topics, because one of the questions we would get often in the Q&A that you would get is, was there a 13th rule that you couldn't get in the book? And you actually mentioned this in the book, that you had what, about 46 other, was it 46?
42.
42. You had 42.
Yeah, the same as Douglas Adams' answer to the universe, life, the universe, and everything, 42 rules, which was actually a coincidence, but I thought it was comical in the aftermath of it. There's 42 rules, so now I've written essays on 24 of them.
When you got to 42, how long did you give it before you said, okay, 42 is enough? Because I know you're pretty methodical.
I just did it in an afternoon, the original list of rules. I was playing on Quora. I wrote about 40 answers for Quora, something like that, and I really haven't partaken in that forum for a long time now. I was investigating it, and some kid had asked, what do you need to know in order to lead a good life, or what's most important to know, something like that. And I thought, well, I'll take a crack at answering this. And I made this list of 42 rules, and it got very popular on Quora, much more popular. Typical Pareto distribution, like that one answer got more views than all of my other answers put together. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I had touched something for some reason. And out of that, when I was asked by an agent who contacted me, Sally Harding, of Cook Agency, she asked me if I was interested in writing something more popular, and I knew that those rules had found an audience, so that seemed to me to be a place to dive in. So anyways, I've only written about 24 of them. In the two books, I have them both here. You can see how they're structured.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
One's white and the other's black. They make a match set. You can read each of them independently, and one concentrates, the first one, An Antidote to Chaos, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, does concentrate on the consequences of excess uncertainty. And the second book concentrates more on an excess of order. Both of those are fundamental existential dangers as far as I'm concerned. And in this universe of value, in the world of value, there are two major domains. And one domain is the domain of order. And you can technically define it. The domain of order is where you find yourself when what you're doing produces the results you want. And that's a really tight formulation, because it gives you a particular idea of what a place and time is. A place and time you occupy is, at any given moment, is the place and time that's defined by your current goal. And you have a map of value that guides you through the actions that are necessary in that domain. And if the result is what you want, which brings motivation and emotion into the picture, then, well, you get what you need or want, but you also validate your theory of existence, because it's good enough to produce the results that you desire. And given that you're fallible and that you don't know everything, you have to use proximal truths. And so something it's a pragmatic, it's a form of philosophical pragmatism. If you make a bridge and it stands up, then you know how to make a bridge. Why? Because the bridge stood up. Now, maybe you overbuilt it. You could have built it more elegantly, but it's sufficiently true so that the bridge functions. And we're like that. We're like engineers. We're cobbling together solutions all the time. And as long as those solutions work, we assume that we're right. Well, that's the domain of order. The domain of chaos emerges when you lay out a plan and into action, and something other than what you wanted emerges. And sometimes that can be a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. And your brain, our psychophysiology is actually adapted to those two domains. When something unexpected happens, all sorts of emotions and motivations break loose, fight and flight among them, anger among them. It gets disinhibited because when you don't know what's happening, you have to prepare for everything. So you get anxious, and then you hyper prepare, which is extremely stressful. And so the domain of chaos is extremely stressful. In small doses, it's exhilarating. Mm-hmm. And that's because, well, when you're where you don't know what's happening, you have the opportunity to learn and to expand your map. And so there's always an interplay between the domain of chaos and the domain of order, but they can each pathologize. And the pathologies of uncertainty are more associated with anxiety and nihilism and depression, and whereas the pathologies of order are more totalitarian. And then I would say as well, the liberal types, the more left-leaning types, are quite sensitive to pathologies of order. They don't like them. That's the patriarchy. Mm-hmm. The patriarchy is the pathology of order, and it's symbolically masculine, something I've been, taken to task for claiming. But the patriarchy itself, the idea of the patriarchy itself, is a symbol. The patriarchy is a symbol. That's why it has such power, and it's a symbol that refers to the domain of order. Now, the domain of order is protective as well as oppressive, but when it degenerates, it becomes oppressive. And I would say it degenerates when it's based on power rather than competence, but it can be based on competence. The Marxist critics and the politically correct types, they insist that every element of the patriarchy is only a consequence of the imposition of order, mm-hmm. forceful imposition of order. It's all power. Well, no, it's not. When it degenerates, that's true. And you can tell that because the thing is, the domain of order will be upheld by those who inhabit it if it's functional. Mm-hmm. If you have to use force, that's already an indication that it's become pathological because people aren't playing voluntarily.
So would you say we're in a degenerative cycle right now? That the cycle seems more degenerative than say a building cycle, or you think that's just the play that's always going on, and you have to figure out your role in it?
Well, I think the play is always going on. And I don't think, the antidote to chaos isn't order, and the antidote to order isn't chaos. The antidote to both is the balancing of them, the active balancing of them. And where you find
you used
meaning.
To do this a lot. You would say the balance, the struggle between liberal and conservative. So people see me doing this all the time. I always credit, Jordan was talking about this. But so you think that's it?
Well, it's really important. It's really important to understand that the antidote to chaos in the final analysis can't just be order, because order itself can degenerate. And so I believe that the antidote is active engagement with the world, honest active engagement with the world, truth. And I think it's also truth motivated by love, which is a motif that runs through this second book in particular. And love is the desire for all things to flourish. In Christ says that you should love your enemies, and what does that mean? And it's really worth thinking about. You shouldn't wish your enemies harm what I mean by that is that it would be better for everyone if they would conduct themselves so that they would flourish. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't defend yourself. It doesn't mean that soldiers aren't necessary or the police. It doesn't mean any of that. It's not a weak need statement. It mm-hmm. means that if you have yourself pointed in the right direction, you don't wish an excess of harm on on the world. You want it to flourish. That's love. So you orient yourself that way. And I do believe that that requires a certain courage, because the world is so flawed and so painful. There's so much suffering in it that it's very difficult to fall in love with it. You keep getting bounced off. You think this is so terrible that maybe it shouldn't even be. But that takes you down a very bad road. So it's love first, and then truth serves that. And I do think that's the motif that runs through the Old and New Testaments, the combination of those two things. Love is the desire that being flourish. And I do believe that truth serves that.
Well, that's a...
So...
No, please finish your thought.
Well, I also think that people find meaning in that. And everyone can answer this for themselves. It's like you have to watch and you have to see where it is that you find the meaning that sustains your life. And I would say it's certainly not been my experience that people find that in deceit or hatred. I mean, they may be tempted by that. They may have their reasons for it. But everyone is ashamed of that and wishes it could be otherwise, even if they don't know what to do about that. So this book, the first chapter is do not casually denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. And I picked that quite carefully because, again, the liberal types are more likely to criticize social institutions. You don't want to do that casually because they structure things and protect you in a way that you're likely not even aware of. And the conservative always says, look, be careful when you change something, because you're changing a bunch of things and you don't know what's going to happen. So be careful. But social institutions can become corrupt even just as a consequence of aging. And so they have to be updated. So they can't stay static. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't respect them. And then creative achievements on the other side. And conservatives, for example, they have a harder time with open people, creative people. You know, the best personality predictor of liberalism is high openness, which is a creativity dimension. Well, it's easy to dismiss art, for example, especially if it doesn't exactly speak to you. But it's through artistic endeavor, it's through creative achievement that the process of update occurs. And so, regardless of your political temperament, you need to see these forces. You need to see the value in these forces and have some respect for them. I think what happens if you get educated, hopefully, is that you get educated beyond the confines of your temperament.
If you'd like to see more honest and insightful conversations with Jordan Peterson himself, check out our Jordan Peterson playlist, which includes every interview I've ever done with him. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist. Both are right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.